In this video, we're going to go through 7 methods for creating cinematic framing and composition using features available on your Lumix camera. These features are used in Hollywood feature films all the time and are a quick, easy, and free way for you to level up your filmmaking. Method number 1, the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds involves a 3x3 grid where we place our subject on one of the intersecting lines in this grid. We can easily get this grid up on our S5 Mark II by going to our monitor and display settings and turning on the photo grid lines. The first option gives us the rule of thirds grid, and this will help us more easily align our subject with the intersecting portions of the rule of thirds grid. The reason we use the rule of thirds grid is because it's generally accepted that this creates an overall more pleasing image. But on the other side of it, it also makes us think more about the composition, what's in the frame. Whilst we have our subject aligned to one side of the frame, what's on the other side? But we'll come to that more so later on. Method number 2, leading lines. This method is all about using what is available to you in your environment. You'll want to look for lines, naturally occurring lines, things like rows of bushes or different buildings and how they work together. We're going to then place our subject in the center of these lines, and they'll act as what we call leading lines. They're called this because they are leading our eyes towards our subject. They act as a guide. And we can make these leading lines even more prominent by using Lumix's 18mm f1.8, a really nice wide-angle lens with a super low f-stop. It's super light and super small, but the image quality is not compromised because of that, because this thing looks great. And pairing this lens with our leading lines, it can make them even more accentuated, making for a more dramatic and impressive looking shot. Method number 3, subject balance. This one's sort of subjective in my opinion, but there's definitely a right and a wrong way to do this. This method is all about finding balance. Balancing your subject with objects in the frame, or even balancing it with negative space, where there's nothing in the frame. This could be something as simple as a street sign. And getting the angles right to accomplish this easily is really easy to do thanks to the tilty flipper screen that the S5 Mark II has. There's a bonus method in here I'm gonna throw in here. I didn't originally plan this, but it's called joining my mailing list and getting a free LUT pack. Okay, this one isn't actually a method for framing and composition, but if you hear me out for a sec, there is some juicy info in here. If you click the first link in the description below, you'll be able to join my mailing list where I share filmmaking tips and tricks, send you guys exclusive discounts for the store that I don't offer on my YouTube videos, sorry, and a bunch of other updates and Lumix chit chat here and there. On my store, mckc.video, there's a bunch of LUTs and power grades for you guys to play around with and check out to create beautiful shots for your videos. And just for you guys watching this part of the video, I'm going to be offering a discount code for 15% off anything in the store. The code is going to be called Symmetry. And that's going to be the next method we're going to be talking about. Thanks for sticking around. Method number 4, symmetry. This one is a little bit trickier because it partly depends on what you can find in your environment. If you're doing this in a studio environment, then it's pretty easy because you can control everything, where everything's placed, how everything's framed, etc. If you're outside though, finding naturally occurring symmetry can be a challenge, but it's not impossible. It's all about having the same thing on the left and the right. And we may even conveniently have leading lines with this method as well, but true symmetry is an appealing technique itself that makes a nice image. In these cases, we'll keep our subject centered because the focus is on the symmetry of the shot. Though I guess we could have symmetry if we had 2 subjects in frame, because then one could be on the right and one could be on the left. A cool feature the S5 has that makes finding the perfect symmetry easier is the 6K open gate mode. This can be useful for post if I want to reframe slightly to make sure the framing is truly symmetrical, but it's also just a unique looking aspect ratio that can lend to the interest of a symmetrical shot. Method number 5, depth. This method is all about creating separation between your foreground, your subject, and your background. Doing this creates a more 3-dimensional kind of feel. And there are a few ways we can do this. The first is by using a fast lens. The 50mm f1.8 prime lens from Lumix is a perfect lens for this. Pairing this with the full frame sensor of the S5 Mark II will help with creating more depth in our shots. The next thing we can do is to focus on separating our subject from the background. Take a look at this shot. It looks a little bit flat, doesn't it? That's because our subject is leaning against a wall and we're filming just straight into that wall. That's really boring. Now let's create some distance between our subject and the wall. Suddenly, there's more depth to the shot, there's more space, and overall it just looks better. We can go a step further as well by having a foreground object in the shot. This adds another layer to our shot and further amplifies the depth in our shot. But we still maintain the focus being on our subject because everything else is blurry, but we can still see that something is there. It's not distracting because it's out of focus, but it adds depth to the shot. So it's adding, not taking away from what we're doing to our shot. Method number 6. Frame in frame. This method involves using your environment to find naturally occurring frames like doorways, hallways, corridors, that's the same thing, windows, and more. Essentially what you're looking for is something in your environment that will create a frame within the frame of your shot. You want to be far away enough so that the frame you're trying to use actually forms a frame around your subject. Now, I've mostly seen frame-in-frame shots filmed locked off on a tripod because the idea is we want to focus on the fact that, hey, it's a frame in a frame, like that's the visually appealing thing in the shot. If that's how you want to do it, then using the S5 Mark II and its Boost IS capabilities will be a really handy way to capture this because it means I don't have to carry a tripod with me and I can still get that locked off tripod effect using the Boost IS and the incredible IBIS that Lumix has developed for all of its cameras. And lastly, method number 7, emphasizing the subject. This one is basically using everything we have learned before to emphasize the subject as much as possible using a multitude of what we have just discussed. You can use things like leading lines as well as having depth in our shot by having a foreground object and having our subject far away from the background to create more depth. You can then even utilize the rule of thirds to truly emphasize your subject through multiple methods. We have all of these elements within our shot that bring attention to our subject, and pairing these methods with the flexibility and advantages that a Lumix camera brings to the table, you'll be creating cinematic shots in no time. If you guys found this video useful, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that like button below, and there'll be a bunch of videos around me so you can learn more about the Lumix cameras that I used to create this entire video.